So that has led us to where we are now in terms of the net loss that we have reported, which is a net loss of 976 after tax. And that is comprised by the decline in advertising revenue, which decreased by 5%, and also the sponsorship decreased by 18%. Now, the way that sponsorship works is it's very important to have certainty around the programs that you have, because what happens is people buy in advance. So if there's certainty about programs that they're going to be able to sponsor, they're able to do that. Now, when the strategy changes midstream, you can almost be certain that sponsorship will not be realized. TV license revenues also decreased by 7% because we changed our methodology of collections. And I think I would just like to say at this point that with us having gone back to the way that we were collecting prior, the past 3 months have shown a huge improvement. I think with June showing an improvement of about 17 million month on month, and in this month of September, we are showing an improvement of about 30 million in collection. So we just want to also thank the public for showing confidence in us again and starting to pay their TV licenses. We really appreciate. From an operational expense point of view, the numbers remained pretty much static from an expense point of view. And the reduction that we saw was really because of the big number of payout stroke people that left the organization. But the big issue is that at the end of March, we had 81 million in the bank, as opposed to 800 million the prior year. So that really got to eat into our reserves, because when you have such a low cash reserve and your revenues are not coming in, you start to put pressure on your reserves, and that's how we ended up eroding that 800 million that we had at a point. Okay, so just on the other aspects is that, and I think Minister started to talk to these deliverables in terms of the content that was procured, because one of the deliverables that we have is to ensure that we also provide content from people with disabilities, and we've managed to do that, albeit limited because we did not have enough funds. There's also the challenge that we have with the provincial procurement because of the lack of infrastructure. So you find that a lot of people move to Johannesburg, and we are very mindful that the only way to achieve success and a turnaround on this is for us to actually form partnerships with the provinces so that we were able to enable it. But SABC can't do it alone. It's just because of the lack of infrastructure overall. We've also seen that SABC radio has also continued to do well, achieving a 71% audience share. There was also some progress that was made around the technology infrastructure, but one of the key projects that could not be completed is the one that the Minister spoke about around the FCC automation. That is absolutely broadcast critical for us because that's how we transmit, but due to financial issues, we really at higher risk from that point of view. So that has been halted because the supplier would like 50% upfront payment, because I think that's where we are now, that people are wanting money before they can provide any service, which is very difficult for us to trade with. And then there's, yeah, that's pretty much it. From a human resources point of view, we did not do well at all, because as Minister said, there was no performance management, but I'm happy to say that at this point, we have signed with all the group executives. They've got a deadline until the 15th of October to sign with all the general managers, and it's going to trickle further down. Training and development was also an issue that we did send people out, but not in the specific skills that we should be focusing on. And I think from a workforce plan point of view, we are currently reviewing the operating model, and we're going to also be taking on the work that's going to be done by the Public Service Commission, which is also going to assist us in terms of reviewing our model and also doing a skills audit. Group internal audit did a lot of work, but I think that as members would know that one of the big complaints was that their recommendations were not being implemented by management, and this is really just an issue of discipline, which I think there's a renewed commitment from management to actually follow through the audit recommendations and implement those, because it was clear in the past year that had that base work been done, we would not be having some of the challenges that we found ourselves having through when the Auditor General came to. So I think at this point I will hand over the numbers to the acting CFO.
Thank you. Morning to the members, and thank you for the opportunity that you've afforded us to present to you. Just on the financial statements, on the first page, on slide 17, we actually detail the opinions that we've had, in the past 7 years, starting from 2011, where we started with a qualification with one paragraph of emphasis. But where we are now, we are sitting with an adverse opinion that we got from the AG with 6 paragraphs, which is a huge regression from where we were, if you look at 2014. So the first point, and I'm sure this was dealt with when the AG presented to the committee, the first paragraph was relating to the going concern issue, which we've dealt with extensively to highlight the fact that SABC is unable to pay their debts as they become due on a monthly basis. So we all know that on average we need about 600 million to actually meet our obligations, which is not the case right now. So this is actually covering that point. And then the second issue related to irregular expenditure, which I'll be dealing with in the next 2 slides to give the details of where we are with irregular expenditure. And then the third paragraph dealt with property, plant and equipment. So this is a big issue which is actually tied to the deferred government grant as well, where SABC, we as the SABC were unable to actually substantiate the balance that's sitting in our books. So a lot of work has to go this year, to try and address that issue. And then the other issue dealt with trade and other payables, which is a basic, accounting issue whereby we have to do monthly reconciliations with for all our suppliers, which led to SABC has not been doing, and therefore this came out. And then the deferred government grant, as I've alluded to, relates to the property, plant and equipment. And then the accumulated, and then the AG actually raised an issue about the misstatements that were found in the financials, which were accumulated and reflected in their report. So in the next slide, we actually show what the irregular expenditure was. So currently we're sitting with about 4.4 billion of irregular expenditure. We started at about 5.1, which was reported at last year. So what happened is there was a lot of work that was done, which actually discovered the fact that of the irregular expenditure of 5.1 that was reported, there was 1.4 which was not correctly disclosed, and therefore that reduced the balance to 3.7. And then in addition, what arose in the 2016-17 year, which is the current fiscal that we're looking at, is a 686 million, which ended up giving us a balance of 4.4. So this actually, the 4.4 is a reflection of the past 5 years and the irregular expenditure that arose in the past 5 years. So it's not just the 1 year figure. So what relates to this year that we're reporting is just the 686. So in terms of the details of what makes it up, is that it's more around the procurement process, where we never obtained a minimum number that's required by the SCM policy, which was 71 million. And then there was issues where we didn't advertise the tenders for a period that is required as per the policy itself. It's 52 million related there. And then the incorrect evaluation and the criteria that was applied, there was 33 million that was actually coming out of that. And then there was irregular awards that were done due to lack of planning. So this is where we're finding ourselves with pressure of us avoiding to be black on air, where we actually have to actually continue and procure as not required by the Act, by the policy. And then there's an issue about 79 million which came out of the DEF that was contravened. So all in all is the 686 million which was not in accordance to policy which arose this year. So in terms of the fruitless and wasteful expenditure, so this is where we've actually paid and not received like a full benefit as the SABC. The breakdown there of what makes up what the movement is for this year is that 74 million. So of the 74 million, 65 million of it is the settlements that we did this year to employees that left the corporation. So the 65 plus the 6 million of legal fees that was associated, with the settlement themselves. So if you take out the two numbers, the actual fruitless number goes down to about less than 3.5 million. And then in terms of what happened subsequent to the year end is that we had that 4.4 billion that was reported as irregular. And then subsequent to that, we then did work to understand what was the cause of it. So the determination was that 2.1 billion of it had to do with awards that were made without obtaining an original tax clearance certificate. So what happened is that those awards were done based on a copy of the tax clearance certificate, which was provided by the suppliers. So we then applied for condonation for those for the 2.1 billion, which we were granted by the interim board. And subsequent to that, we were advised by the AG to actually apply to National Treasury to actually sign off on the condonation itself. But Treasury came back to say that it is not in their duty to do that. If the board has given that sign-off, it's sufficient. So we can therefore assume that the sign-off that we got from the interim board is sufficient to give the condonation. And then I won't go into detail on the actual numbers, which we've actually touched on. So when you look at the revenues themselves, that last year we were sitting with 7.9 billion, and currently we are sitting with 7.5. So our revenue so that actually led to the loss that we're currently seeing of about 1 billion before tax and 976 after the tax. So the reasons that we are actually outlining, which are coming in the next page, are due to the revenue decline, which we've talked about. And then we've seen as well that our cash reserves have actually shrunk. So we've invested about 300 million in capital projects, which are outlined on the financial statements to be more broadcast related and purchase of improvements to our properties. And then we've actually increased as well our investment in meeting our mandates, which is more for sports and the events of national importance. And then we had an increase in our royalty fee payments. Initially, we were paying royalties for radio at about 3% of our revenue, based on 3% of our net revenue. But however, this decision was actually changed to pay revenues at 4%. So that actually led to a decrease in our cash resources and our profitability. And then what we did as well, we had additional investment in content costs, which was the 80-20 and the 90-10 investment in music quotas for radio. And then the other was minimal, which was the increase in the personal cost, which was above inflation, and increases as well due to settlements that we had. And then this slide here actually shows us the split of our revenue. So we are still highly dependent on commercial revenue at about 76% of advertising, plus 5% coming from, which comes from sponsorship. And then I've alluded to the reasons why why the decline in the commercial revenue. So it was more the tough economic conditions which were spoken about by the group CEO, and then the changes in the TV license collection strategy, where we actually changed our processes in how we collect TV licenses. And then the other issue was more related to the investment in the local content, which was an effect that we had of 29 million on radio and 183 that we lost on TV. And then we had losses as well that were due to implementation of the system. And then in the next slide, we are actually showing what the split of our expenses are. So we are still we are still spending a lot of money paying for salaries. So about 32% of our expenses go to salaries, and then 19 plus the 7% goes into broadcasting. And then the other costs are still below the 10% mark. So this is a position that we actually need to change so that we can become more profitable. And then on the balance sheet itself, we do show the fact that on the assets, our assets are currently sitting at 4.8 billion, coming from 5.8. The biggest drop there is the cash reserves. As you can see that we were sitting with 881 last year. We're currently sitting with 81 million. So that 800 million is straightly coming from comes from the drop in cash, and then the other drop comes from our trade receivables, where we were actually soliciting our supplier, our debtors to actually pay us early. So this therefore resulted in the reduction in the balance itself. And then on the liabilities themselves, we're sitting with liabilities of about an equity of about 4.8. But there we are actually showing the fact that last year we had a deferred tax asset, which was actually reduced, which was actually taken off because we are currently sitting in a loss position and we can't carry that. And then the other thing that we just need to highlight on the balance sheet itself is the fact that we normally had prepayments which were huge and sitting in the balance sheet, but due to the fact that we're now having cash crisis, we were forced to actually renegotiate and delay the upfront payments. And then on the last slide, you do see that we do highlight our achievements and awards, which is a whole list of achievements that were achievements that were done by radio and achievements from TV itself. So it's a whole list of awards that we are listing there, including our sports awards. So members are at liberty to actually read through the list. And that's where I end. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the last few slides are really just capturing what we've already spoken about in terms of what was not achieved. So it's just a further detail of the predetermined objectives. Can go through them. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Can you point me to a page where you are dealing with the editorial policy in your slides?
There is no page about the editorial policy because there's reference to it, but we have only started in this fiscal. So this we are dealing with up until March. The statement is the performance up until March. So the progress about the editorial policy now is that we had requested, the teams had requested an extension because as they were going through the provinces, they realized that there was more work that needed to be done. So the extension was then up until the 30th of September. Because initially we were going to finish it in August. So we then gave a month extension. So now it's being consolidated for the second round because now we're going to go back to all the places that we went to now present the consolidated one.
Thank you. Are you done, Minister?
Yes, Chairperson.
Yeah, Bongo, that's the report of the SABC progress report on SABC third quarter. Why do I talk about that? Why do I talk about quarter report when it's annual reports? correction, it's an annual report. Members, let us engage on the report. Honorable Van Dam.
Thanks, Chair. I think the presentation and the annual report confirms what we've known and was revealed during the SABC inquiry. Gross financial mismanagement, irregular expenditure in the billions, wasteful expenditure, severe losses. So it confirms what we know. So what I'm interested in is more the way forward. I think we've spent a lot of time talking about the problems at the SABC. So now I am interested in moving forward. What's being done to make sure that we don't come back here next year and we have the same conversation like we've had over the last number of years about the SABC. I would like next year for the SABC to come and present a glowing annual report showing no irregular expenditure, no wasteful expenditure, and showing an SABC that we can be proud of. Because I think we've spent a lot of time as Parliament investing in finding out where the problems are. So I must be honest and say I am a little bit worried about the direction that things are going now. And I have a few questions about the way forward. Now, we know that the interim board had spent quite a bit of time advertising for the top 3 positions and interviewing, and then in fact told us that they'd found suitable candidates, which were now awaiting the minister's approval. Now, we know in media reports that on Sunday that the minister had apparently requested that the interim board chair provide her with those names so those names can be approved by the ANC's deployment committee. That for me is seriously concerning because the reason why the SABC has found itself in the situation it has is because of political interference, it's because of people deployed to certain positions because of their close proximity to the ruling party. So I'd like the minister to confirm whether this is indeed true, that she requested that she be given those names for approval by the deployment committee. And then also the minister has now said that she's not happy with those names of the top 3 individuals that have been interviewed. What are the reasons for that unhappiness? I think we need to be taken in confidence as Parliament about who those individuals are, what their CVs are, why are they not suitable. I think we need to be taken into confidence. What is wrong with those individuals? And then also, quite importantly, what's the way forward now? Are the positions going to be re-advertised? What's going to happen? Where is the process as we speak? What's the way forward? And then I'm also concerned about what decisions have been taken over the last 3 weeks that the SABC has been without a board. We know that there's certain decisions that must meet board approval. In terms of the SABC charter, the board is ultimately responsible for the affairs of the SABC. They're the accounting authority. That's why it was actually difficult for us to even have this meeting without a board here, because they are the ones that ultimately account to us. So what decisions have been taken over the last couple of weeks, particularly financial decisions? The 11 million bonus that is shown in the annual report that was paid to Hlaudi Motsoeneng, we know that the interim board was withholding that until Hlaudi paid back the money. Is that still the case? Has that money been paid to him? Where's that money? The disciplinary action against James Aguma, has that been held in abeyance until a board has been appointed? What's going on with that? So my concern is about a lot of the decisions that the interim board had taken. Where are those decisions now? What's happening? Have any of them, been changed? And then, Minister, the SABC board appointments. I am very concerned also that you were involved in that process, because in terms of the Broadcasting Act, it's very clear that Parliament interviews, vets and recommends, and then it is the President that appoints the board. There's absolutely, in terms of the Broadcasting Act, no involvement of the Minister. I think it was not the right decision for that to be put in your lap, and you should have in fact referred it back to the Presidency and said, it is your role, Mr. President, to make sure that you appoint the board. It is not my duty to make sure that I undertake the vetting process, particularly if Parliament, the body that is in charge with recommending those names, has already done thorough vetting. I think you should have referred that back to the presidency, because in public you became associated with the person that was appointing the board. You were the spokesperson for it. You were the one responding to queries. You should have referred it back to the presidency, because it's not actually your job. It's the president's job. And then in terms of some of the reports that I read, was that there were some members that were requested to submit additional documentation. I don't know if I read that correctly. Was it some or all? Were all candidates that were recommended vetted a second time, or was it just some? And if it was just some, why is it just some? How was that decision taken to vet some of them and not all of them? And what basis were those some candidates vetted? I think that's all for now, Chair.
That was the only hand. Oh, Honorable Kungubele.
Thank you, Chair. One must appreciate the presentation. General to the Minister, the material emphasis on performance information, they cut across, not just SABC. And if you go to area of key controls, SABC is in the disaster zone. Without repeating things that I don't remember, I've said that I think what we need, Chair, without repeating what the AG said, is that there must be a day where the department, together with entities, present to the committee, because I think this is what has been missing a number of times, present to the committee a plan to correct these issues. Because that is not being done, they keep on being repeated. For instance, so, one is looking at the use of these words which would be nice under normal circumstances, but the content that insults them. For instance, we speak here of the strategic outcome-oriented goals. One went to your heading financial sustainability, content and platforms, human resource governance. What one can pick there, what is the intended to be done over what period, before that which is, and what is envisaged and what is going to be done. Let me put it this way. For instance, if you go to financial sustainability and you say goal, remember we meet you quarterly. When one looks under that thing goal there, one doesn't know what you intend to achieve in a quarter. Same apply to all of them. In other words, when we meet in a quarter, because of the manner the performance information is articulated, there's totally no sense across the board. So if we meet you quarterly, we are supposed to meet you because you had a predetermined results to be finished by that quarter. Because we know your predetermined results, when we meet you in that quarter, we must be able to say, are you on course towards realizing financial sustainability? And then you can go to all goals, that doesn't exist, all of them. In other words, the performance evaluation as articulated here makes it difficult for the committee to do useful oversight. To me, it's a serious indictment. Why I call it serious indictment is that it cannot be understood, it cannot be understood why is it normal for anyone to have a performance plan of this nature and it's signed, it's your performance, when we cannot explain what we want you to perform. Minister has already said, for instance, in the past, the minister was saying there were no performance agreements and whatever, people given bonus. I commend the minister for citing that. But the problem is that why Chair One is saying there's a need in a short space of time for them to come back and correct these issues. Because we cannot, if we take ourselves seriously, we cannot wait for another annual report to still report on things that we don't know what those things are. Now the question is, when we approve, actually he speaks bad about us. I know the minister, when I raised this thing last week, he says, I was not there, minister. He says, you were there, part of that, and so on. I was saying, minister, that under normal circumstances, we're not supposed to approve budgets with a senseless information of this nature. Because it also speaks about us, Chair, as a portfolio committee. When you say we approve budget, we approve the budget to do what? It's not clear here across the board. Now, if you go to key controls, or I've already spoken about that, I'm sorry, and the records of adverse finding on SABC and a general downward slide. All I'm saying, I don't want to spend a lot of time repeating what we've said a number of times, because even your short presentation, which seeks to, because when I read the main document, I thought when the presentation comes, maybe it will assist us to get clarity, because the point is, I thought if we read these things alike in the same way, you would say, I was not there. I know that's an easy one to say. I was not there, but at least in your presentation now, you would anticipate your critical view. But it's not there. You present now as if this thing is normal. Yes, it's just frustrating. But my proposal is that, Chair, can in a short space of time, the department or together come and deal with the following. Remember the three areas that AG deals with: fair representation of statements, with no significant material misstatements, your compliance with the laws and regulations that deal with financial matters, and the third one being the performance information, which is central, that deals with the articulation of realization of the predetermined objectives. All is wrong. A month is even too long, Chair, for them to come to us and demonstrate how they intend, in the one that will be monitoring now, making sense in this. I thought there's a lot of things that I hear, and one, in the words of Honorable Fandama, you do want to repeat things that we have seen that are there, but I agree and follow that process. Let's work together in a more effective interaction in correcting these things. I'm saying within a month. Can the department with the editors come and say, because there's another thing, the last one, Chair, is when that comes, can we be presented, Minister, with what is the oversight unit, the state of readiness of the oversight unit of entities? Because the biggest money of the department, where it goes to entities. Is it 95% or 75% or something like that? Yet, you don't have a sense that the oversight unit, AG, if you were here, we challenge the AG that on the oversight unit there's no material, there's no material emphasis. Yet entities are in trouble Yet the unit is supposed to be dealing with the state of what to call of entities. But how does oversight unit get that brilliant color when what it's supposed to do is at a 0 level? So when they come, Chair, presentation on the readiness of the state of the oversight unit to do that oversight, both in terms of resourcing it from the point of money, skills, and everything. Because again, these two things are critical, I'm saying. The senseless performance information, the non-readiness of the oversight unit to deal with entities. If those two are not dealt with, our relationship is not based on anything. Thanks.
I'm sure Honorable said is going to raise a number of questions. But what Honorable Kungubele is saying, in your report, there is nothing that says, by now I don't think we need a plan, we need something that has been done. Yes, plan, fine, but something that has been done. Just go to the fraud and consequence management page on AG's report. It's very succinct, very clear as to what needs to be done. But I haven't seen that in the report. That on those cases we have done, it will be nice if you can get something like that, Honorable Kungbel. On those cases, this ABCD we have done, and we don't see, because consequent management is a very critical issue if you want to go forward in dealing with issues. Honorable Seth.
I think one other reason why we are in this state of affairs, you'll remember at some stage we had agreed on a principle which says that every time the entities and the department come to appear before the committee, we'll need briefing on the issues that we have raised in our past engagements. Whether they're coming here for a quarterly report or an annual report, at least we need a briefing on the issues that we have raised in our previous engagement. Because then there's no reason why we must call people here. Because these issues that we raise, like today, we are not raising them for compliance purposes. We want action on these issues. So even today, over and above this document, this presentation, to me, there was supposed to be a separate presentation. We talked to the issues that we have raised in the last engagement. And if there are difficulties, we should then be able to know where are those difficulties, why are certain things not attended to. That's one issue. Honorable Mondle spoke about slide 17, which is a very worrisome situation. The adverse opinion with 6 paragraphs. It's a very serious issue that says all is not well, and obviously we'll have to do something about it. But I need to raise 3 issues that will need to be responded to. One is with regard to consultancy fees. If you can be briefed on the work that has been done by consultants during the whole financial year that we are talking about now. Linked to that one is the issue of the loss in the audience. To me, it's not enough to just say there's this thing. Perhaps we were supposed to be getting a plan to deal with this particular issue of the loss of audience with regard to the work that you are doing. There is a somewhere, I don't remember what page is it, where you are talking about decline in sponsorship as well.
Performance area.
Yeah, it's important as well to also brief us on how do you find yourself correcting this particular challenge going forward. The last one, Chair, we asked the members of the interim board in one of the engagements about the claims that they were making with regard to the work that they have been doing. And the reason why we asked that question was because in one of the engagements there was an issue which says they have since decided not to claim because of the work that they are doing until such time that the company is financially stable. So when we raised, I think in the last engagement, there was like something completely different from what we were told earlier. So it might be important for now to be told how much has been claimed collectively by the members of the interim board in the last 6 months. It's important because I'm saying, raising this thing because there was a contradictory information that we got in our last engagements, while we were told that we are not claiming because we are waiting for the company to be financially stable. Now, of late, we were then told, no, we've been claiming. Can we be clarified on this particular issue? Chair, having said that, I'm saying the report says all is not well. I think I appreciate the work that has been done in the area of TV license revenue. As you have indicated that in the last 2 months, there is a bit of improvement in that area. I think we appreciate really, because this is one other area that we have always been complaining about. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. I'll start with the Honorable Van Dam's questions. Section 101 of the Constitution reads Section 101(2). A written decision by the President must be countersigned by another cabinet member if that decision concerns a function assigned to that other cabinet member. Now, whether or not I was supposed to have gotten involved in this process, I think the Constitution is very clear on that. But the extent of my involvement is another matter. If I am requested to assist in a process and there is nothing that I see as untoward in providing that type of assistance, that is exactly what I will do, because a request has been put to me. As the department, we were requested to assist with this process. And maybe this will give me an opportunity to also correct what other people feel and think that I also felt and thought about the matric certificates of the candidates. I also thought it was a bit frivolous of us to expect people with post-matric qualifications to present a matric certificate. But what was raised with us was that if you have claimed to have a matric certificate, present it so that it can be determined whether or not it was obtained fraudulently. So my feeling as well was in line with a lot of people, that if you have a post-matric qualification, really what's the issue here? But nonetheless, that is what had happened. I know that all candidates, it was not some candidates, it was all candidates. We couldn't have asked for further information on people for provision and discriminate against others. Everybody was asked to provide further information, and we didn't ask certain people or some of the members. The recruitment process of CEO and COO. Again, I don't want to appear as though I'm maligning the very good candidates, the 6 very good candidates that had been suggested to me for the post of CEO and COO. But you must remember that according to the MOI, I have a responsibility to approve the profiles before the recruitment process has begun. That's what the MOI says. And I raised that with the interim board chairperson. And their understanding was different from mine, because I suspect they thought I was working on an MOI that had not been approved by the CIPC. So we were at cross purposes on that one, and they went ahead nonetheless. Now, when I saw the candidates and looking at the magnitude of problems that we've experienced in the SABC, I had to be very circumspect about that, because ultimately it is not the board that is finally accountable on matters relating to the SABC, but you hold me accountable. If the board messes up, you will hold me accountable. And I then went through the names that had been given, and I don't want to appear to malign people, because I will not do that. But safe to say, had that process been shared with me and a common understanding between me and the interim board insofar as the type of individual required was concerned, it would have made things a lot more easier. When the names came to me, people had some experience in broadcasting as presenters, but not at an executive level. There was no way Honorable Van Dam I would have appointed a person that has experience as a presenter or a junior, or person who comes from a junior management in the organization, and appoint that person as a COO of the organization. Because basically the COO is the one that is responsible for the operational matters of the organization. And you need someone who has specific experience both in television and radio broadcasting, and at a particular level, not at the level at which I had seen the CVs of the candidates. So that was the difficulty that I had. The interim board gave me profiles to approve post facto. Now, I had a problem with that, because the process of the SABC inquiry spoke to exactly that, issues of governance, issues of compliance. There was no ways I was going to condone that, because I had informed people that this is the process, and people did not want to listen. Now, when the names finally came through to me, as I said earlier on, they did not speak to what I would have wanted as the ultimate accounting.
A point of order.
Okay. I want your counseling. We are bordering on dealing with the assessment of people who might be appointed or not appointed. And I'm not sure if we're working on correct ground in the manner we deal with the question now. One would have been comfortable if the minister asserted her authority in terms of constitution and so on. Maybe the nature of the question forced her to go that. I'm saying your counseling is going to assist, because we might find ourselves dealing with the details we are not supposed to deal with as a committee.
Yeah. I'm not very sure, members. This one caught me off guard. Yes, Honorable Fanda.
Thanks, Chair. I think we have a duty as the body that conducts oversight over the SABC that we be taken into confidence about that process, because we need to know. There was an interim board. They've interviewed people and they've said, they thought them suitable. The minister doesn't think them suitable. I think this is an issue that's very key to the way forward that we discussed about. That's the information we want to know about. How does the problems at the SABC get fixed? So I think that's very, very critical to actually what we're discussing, because even Honorable Gungubele said what he would have liked today is a report about what is the way forward. So I think this is central to the way forward, making sure that there's permanent top management. So I don't think there's anything wrong that we put ourselves in a position where we're now assessing candidates. I think we need to have this information as Parliament, and I don't think there's anything wrong with the manner in which the Minister has reported it to us.
Dolash, can see you want to talk.
Chairperson, thank you very much. I think the manner the question was put really maybe forced the minister to get into that detail she had to get into. But I had the same feeling with Honorable Gungubele that indirectly or directly we are busy assessing. I don't think it's fair. I think it suffices for me, for the minister to say, I was not taken into confidence by the interim board. And that should just end there. Because my worry is for us to do something that will come back to haunt us as a portfolio committee, because before us there's no item that seeks to assess or even to review the process that was followed. So I had the same feeling. I think the question was put. She had to give that explanation. However, we're bordering exactly to what Honorable Gungubele is saying. I think for me, if you can just end it there, note the fact that the minister had these difficulties with the process. And we are in a very good environment of having to have a new board that, in my view, will have to be properly inducted for the understanding of the role of their role and the role of the shareholder. I think those issues should be really dealt with, especially by the portfolio committee, because if they aren't, they come back to be a problem for ourselves. So that will be my take, Chairperson. Thank you.
All right. Honorable Kalago.
I think so far, I don't think there's anything so far wrong on the approach of the minister, based on the question itself, as the members have said. I think the only thing we can, because this is in the public domain in the first place, and whether correctly or wrongly the minister have been accused on papers publicly, I think it's correct that she clears those issues and take us into confidence, because already this is in the public domain, and it has been reported several times by the media. As long as we are not getting into, I couldn't agree with this one because of skills 1, 2, 3. That's what we must run away. As long as the minister doesn't get into that, so that we don't find ourselves having said we have actually assessed them. But I think the trend, she's right. She must actually answer and explain herself, so that also she clears her name, because yes, she has been accused of getting involved in areas which I think there is a committee who want just that to be cleared. As long as we're not getting into what qualifications of the candidate, who qualifies or who doesn't, as long as we're not getting into that, I think she's right here.
Okay, thanks. Can you proceed, Minister, with that understanding?
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I think I was very clear from the onset that I really would not want to malign any of the candidates, because, truly speaking, they are very good candidates. but I outlined what I was expecting based on the problems of the SABC. And I might have gone into some other territory that I shouldn't have gone to, but it was all in an attempt to try and explain this thing of this minister who is not empowered to intervene on issues relating to the appointment of the three, which really is my responsibility ultimately. I'm the one that approves the position of CEO, COO, and CFO according to the MOI that is currently operational. And if I may just go through it, it says that the CEO, CFO, and COO shall be confirmed by the minister before being appointed by the board, pursuant to the board having embarked on the following processes. The board shall present the terms and conditions of appointment, that is the employment contract, to the minister for approval.
I don't know what's going on. There is some interference. There is a cell phone.
It's Van Dam. It says the board shall present the terms and conditions of appointment, which is the employment contract, to the minister for approval prior to embarking on the process of recruiting suitable candidates. Now that process starts from advertising right up to the final countdown of the 6 people. The board shall advertise or employ any other executive search mechanism to source potential candidates. So I just wanted to put it on record that what was expected to have been done was not done. And because we come from that situation in the SABC of non-compliance, I was not in any way going to condone a process that did not take this into account. I'm trying my very best to be a good minister to the department and also the entities under my control. So I will do that, but I will not interfere in operational issues of the SABC. That I will not do. So I think I've covered that one, Honorable Van Dam. Huh?
What are you saying for now?
She says ANC deployment.
Oh. Members, don't forget that let us not forget that you are talking
now.
Talking to the Shadow Minister of Communications.
Is she my shadow? Okay. So you need to comply. Honorable Van Dam, I think it is common knowledge, and I think it happens in your party as well. Every party that is in office will have an interest, because ultimately issues come back to that party if there is non-compliance or non-performance of individuals. And if members of the African National Congress are called to account, that's what happens. They are called to account, and I did not set the rules, and neither did this portfolio committee set those rules. It happens in all political parties. On the issues that had been raised by Honorable Gungubel, I will leave it to the CEO to respond to that. But if you remember, when I made my presentation initially, I did speak to planned interventions on all of those areas where there was non-achievement, because my presentation only looked at non-achievement. And I did outline all of the interventions that are in place. Whether or not these interventions are adequate is another matter altogether. Maybe it is something that we could all look at together and determine whether or not they will address all of these issues that you have spoken to or alluded to. Our presentation today was only insofar as the annual report was concerned. But we are quite prepared to come back to you on interventions and plans that we're putting in place, including providing the human resources required for us to deal with those issues. And I'll just give you an example. The department has not met deadline after deadline after deadline on DTT. And this was reported, and its implications were also reported in the AG's office. But what we have done is that we've put a digital migration committee in place, advisory committee in place, that involves almost all industry players to tap into the skills within the industry, which we might not have in the department or within the entities, but also on financial resources that are available to assist us. Because you all know in this portfolio committee that our budget really would not help us to meet all of the objectives that we have set ourselves to achieve. So industry has come on board, and we are ensured the SABC is part of this process, and so is the oversight people in the department. But again, as you said, Honorable Gungubele, that entity really needs to be beefed up. As I said last week, all positions will be filled by January next year, whether it is in the SABC, in the MDDA, in all of my entities, all of them would be filled by the end of January. But you must also remember that there are those that would be filled very soon, because we've also gone through interviews and stuff like that, and some of the issues sit on my desk for my final approval. So we are on track with ensuring that we fill these positions, because it is an untenable situation where we have people acting forever and these positions are not filled, just really for purposes of stability of the organization and the entity. So we still have that vacancy of DDG for oversight in the department that needs to be filled. Very urgent, I agree with you. Yeah, I think on financial, some of the interventions that we've put through, because the SABC does not have money, we've asked other entities within government to assist. Like, for instance, your Public Service Commission, which is not necessary, which reports directly to Parliament, to assist with issues relating to human resource turnaround. We asked the National Treasury to assist us with issues that are related to financial stability. We've also asked the Auditor General as well to assist us with issues relating to financial stability as well. So even when it comes to others, for instance, we've got the Public Service Innovation Center, we have got the CSIR, we've got the HSRC. Those are organizations that we will tap into to ensure that they help us in determining or assisting us in putting together plans that will help us to effect the implementation of the strategies that we have.
Okay, thank you for the questions. And yes, I acknowledge that some of the detail on the PDOs may not be that detailed. We are back here on the 26th of October to present our quarterly report. Now, in our... Sorry. He started. It's the predetermined objectives. Apologize. You did. You did. So in our quarterly review, we then give the targets of the quarter. So I think that maybe because we took it for granted that we're reporting for March and we gave the full picture. However, we are going to improve. We are going to improve on that. So we acknowledge the improvement. So I think when we come back with the detail of the quarter, we will then also go into detail about the implementation plan. But maybe just at a high level, because I think Honorable Van Dam wants to know what is being done, and that's not the part that we had presented, but I'll just try and talk through it. When we, in the beginning of this fiscal, so around April, when we started with the funding document, one of the requirements was from Treasury to say what is it that you are going to do to turn around the organization? You are not just going to tell us about wanting the money. So we did put some initiatives in the document that goes to Treasury, but we did not say we will only implement when we get the money. So some of those turnaround are the things that we are busy with now. So for instance, we are really looking at not being totally dependent on advertisers and starting to also relax some of our models in terms of how we trade. So typically how we trade is simply that you buy airtime, we give you exposure, and that's as far as it goes. We are seeking different partnerships to say, are we able to partner differently with industry in terms of co-productions as well? We're also saying that we do not have to commission and own everything. Where it's possible, where people can partner with us so that the fund does not completely depend on the SABC. Then there's a huge issue around the cost containment, to say that we have to recognize that when SABC was in the lead position, a lot has changed since then, but we've remained the same. So what is it that we're needing to do so that we can be adaptable? And this is where the work of the Public Service Commission comes in, and also the review of the operating model, because the way that we are structured, we are not agile enough in terms of actually managing to access some of the easy funding that is available in terms of revenue. So the focus is very much on diversification of revenue as opposed to just saying it's advertising. And because we do know the challenge that government has, we can't come back and say we want money from government, so we're looking at different sources. There's also an issue around what normally people call investor confidence. The advertisers take the lead from how we are managed and how we operate. And we have been trying to ensure that we build that relationship so that the confidence comes back. So we have regular engagements with them, and that's where the issue that you're raising around what are we doing around sponsorships. Sponsorships simply mean people want stability. So when you say, I am going to have Generations on the 4th of November, they buy into that. If you start to chop and change, then it becomes a problem. So we've been going to industry, assuring them to say that the strategies that, because when the interim board came on in place, they reviewed the strategies that we had prepared and tweaked those and approved them. So at the moment, we are implementing that which they approved. I think it was in May. Was it May or June? I can't remember. But they've approved those. So we're sticking to that plan and ensuring that there's predictability and that we are going to be able to deliver those. In terms of the audience losses, we really, as I say, that people consume television in a particular way. They need to know what it is that they're going to get, and that's how the advertisers buy as well. So we're also doing long-term plans in terms of what our content offering is and what our value proposition is. Honorable Van Dam also asked about the decisions that have been made in the past 2 weeks. So today is day 14 of not having the board. We wouldn't have met with them in between. We haven't even had an exco. How it normally works is that we have an operations committee that has got a limited authority, I think, of 15 million, and then we have got exco with a higher limit. We haven't even had those meetings in the 2 weeks because they're scheduled for once a month. So they haven't happened. They were going to happen, I think Ops is happening on Thursday, and then Exco will happen next week. So there has not been any financial decisions that needed to be tabled. What we were mindful of is that on the 20th, the interim board also understood that it would be doing its last business in terms of the long-term plan, because we also didn't want to expect the new board to come in October and want them to make decisions. So at the moment we've got the schedule of the 3 days in terms of the induction and exactly how we're going to run the induction. Depending on when the appointment gets done and the approval, we will then run with it. You asked the question about what is happening with all the cases. Almost all the cases are being handled by the SIU. I think the last time we were here, the proclamation wasn't signed. It then got subsequently signed. The SIU has set up office in the SABC, and they are going through all these cases. So the case of Mr. Mutsuning and Mr. Aguma, in terms of their pension money, part of what the SIU is investigating. And then I just wanted to clear something about the 11 million was paid. It was paid. Yeah, so it was the pension that was intended then to assist us to then claw back. And if my memory serves me well, I think there's a court case sometime now in beginning of November or end of October. So that's in that sphere. And then there was issue around. Okay, so I've spoken about sponsorship and audience. I'll hand over to the CFO about the claim for the board fees and also the consultancy fees. I think I've covered everything.
Okay. Just on the question relating to the professional fees, currently on the financial statements, we are reflecting a figure of 99 million, which was paid, which is split in between audit fees of 16 million, and then there's an 83 million, which is split between managerial and technical fees. So where you're asking about the benefit that was derived, from paying those consulting fees, I'd really like to actually state that most of the contracts that contribute significantly to these consulting fees have been handed over for SIU investigation, and therefore that will actually determine if there was value derived, from the fees themselves. So I think that's where it is, because I think a part of it was the secular contract, which we know about, that is with the SIU, and there were other 3 or 4 contracts which were handed over as well to the SIU.
All right, Minister Dlolo and the SABC's acting executives there, the CFO, as well as we've been hearing from the CEO and the COO, all presenting the public broadcaster's annual report in Parliament. We also understand that...
So since they started in March, they were paid for the month of April, and then since then they have not been paid. So what they did, this is when they had said that because SABC is in crisis, they are electing not to be paid, but wait for the for the stability to happen. So, and what has subsequently happened was the fact that due to the term of office coming to an end, there was then a discussion to say what happens then, because this decision can't be taken over and implemented to the board of 12. We then decided that we will actually pay them. So what we've done is on last week on Wednesday, we paid what was due for May and for June, and then the balance is going to be paid at the end of October. So we are paying out what is outstanding to them. Thanks.
We have an hour to go with SABC. And then we break for lunch at 1, and we have MDDA until 5. So, but if you don't have questions, then we can call MDDA to start. Honorable Tsedi and Van Dam.
It's not necessarily a follow-up, Chair, but if we don't have follow-up issues to make, there is nothing wrong in us starting with MDDA. That's what I'm saying. For now, I think we're satisfied with the responses that we
say that you are satisfied. You are not sure about other members. Honorable Van Dam.
Thanks, Chair. I most certainly have follow-ups. The Minister's response about the appointment, the process of the appointment of the top management, brings to the fore once again the issue that was discussed in the SABC inquiry about the MOI, and that there's 2 different conflicting MOIs, approval processes, that it may conflict with other legislation. Now, in terms of the SABC charter, which I was going, oh, there it is. My computer died for a little bit, but it's back now. In terms of the SABC charter, it says that the non-executive directors, i.e. the board, shall, after they have conducted interviews and compiled a short list of preferred candidates, recommend to the minister for his or her, in this instance, approval or rejection, the appointment of preferred candidates to fill as the executive directors of the corporation. So in terms of the SABC charter, the process followed by the board was in fact correct. In the charter, there's no provision for the minister being drawn in at the beginning of the process. So this is once again an issue that needs resolution. Which MOI is relevant? Do we rely on the SABC charter or on the MOI? And I think this is an issue that needs to be resolved. But in terms of the SABC charter, the board was absolutely correct in the way that the process that they followed. And that's a document that's not under dispute. The SABC charter is very much agreed upon by all different stakeholders. The MOI isn't. So in fact, I think if we have to choose a document to rely on, it's the SABC charter. And in terms of that document, they were correct. What the minister didn't answer is, what now? What happens now? Are those positions going to be re-advertised? Will the term of the acting office bearers be extended until what point? What are the dates? When are those? If it's going to be re-advertised, when is that process going to happen? And then about the deployment committee, I must correct the minister. I can't speak for other parties, but I can certainly speak for mine. There's no deployment committee. The only positions that we approve, and I know because I serve on those bodies, are those of political appointments, so of MECO members, of cabinet members, of chief whips. Those are the only political appointments that we approve. We do not approve positions, those are political deployments. We do not approve the positions of state-owned entities, of civil servants, because those are not politicians. Those people that serve on those bodies are there to serve not only the DA, but everyone, regardless of political affiliation. So I must correct that. There's no deployment committee in the DA. And most certainly, I think it's quite wrong that the top management of a CEO must first be approved by a political party. There's no legal basis for that. And then the way forward, I keep coming back to this. I don't like talking only about problems.
Just on the point before this, just keep your points.
Okay.
It will be very problematic to bring the party workings in the committee. I'm not saying you are right, Minister is wrong. But discussing how parties deal with their issues, it will be wrong for us to engage on that. Because I think we started wrongly when we did talk about deployment committees and all those things. In my view, I think it's incorrect to get into that. If the governing party deals with issues in a particular way, as a governing party nationally, and the governing party in the Western Cape is dealing with issues in a particular way, I don't think we must deal with that in the committee, because we'll confuse what we are supposed to deal with in the committee. I just have that plea to the committee, not for you, even from how the minister started. How the minister started the issue, the response. I think it will give us problems. The response, for me, it's not supposed to be like that, because there will be a follow-up like what we are raising. Members, that's my view. I don't think we need really to get into how we work as political parties. We are governing parties, and we are governing parties. It may be national or in a province and all of that. So let us not engage on those matters. I'll appeal to you, Honorable Van Dam, and the minister too, to leave the issues of parties in that particular way.
Chair, I'm going
if the minister, as a minister deployed by the ANC, and how she handles issues with her political party, it must be issues of her and the political party, not to be brought to the committee.
Chair, I'm going to respectfully disagree with your position, very much because we know that part of the reason the SABC finds itself where it is because of political interference. So political interference is very much an issue related to the SABC, but I've put the question to the minister. Well, I mean, I wanted to make the point that I don't agree with ANC approving candidates for SOEs, and also to clarify the point where the minister said there's deployment committees in all parties, there's no deployment committee in the MDDA. The other question I wanted to ask was about the way for...
Manpind, I want us to stop this because the ANC doesn't have those processes of appointing state-owned enterprises, whether it's a CEOs and all of that. There is nothing like that in the African National Congress. I know. So let us not get to that. I was up in the city, even how the minister started, it was incorrect. So I want us to leave it at that the ANC doesn't have a process to appoint whoever. It deploys political deployees, whether it's the minister, deputy, the MPs and all of that.
Which very much contradicts what the minister said. But moving on, because she said there's a process in the ANC, and you're saying there isn't, so I'm not sure which is the truth. But now, the way forward, which is the point I keep harping on. The acting CEO says there was a document tabled to National Treasury, which one dealt with improving the SABC's funding model, which would ensure less reliance on government funding. I would have thought that this was a document that we should have been appraised of, because it's very much our concern about how the SABC is funded, how the funding is improved, so that National Treasury doesn't have to keep dishing out bailouts and government guarantees. So I thought that would be a document that we should have very much been appraised of. For me, it's still a serious concern that we had to find out about that amount in a about way in a different committee. It was tabled before the Select Committee of Finance, the amount, but we were not told that amount. I mean, the minister has refused to speak to that amount. So can I request then at that first quarter meeting, which is the 20-something of October, that document, can we agree as a committee that document, which one, speaks to the way forward about the SABC in terms of its funding model, which two, deals with the 3 billion guarantee that's been requested, can I request that document be provided to us? I think it's really, really irregular that information has been kept from us. We need to know, we need to be comfortable as the body that is doing oversight, comfortable with the fact that the
to go back there.
Chairperson, just to correct something. I never said that there's deployment committees in every party. I said every party would have an interest in process. Not the appointment of CEO or anything to that effect, in process. So I was very clear that I did not say, yes, that's what I said. And I did not say there is a deployment committee. I never used the word deployment committee. That was you, Honorable Member. On the funding proposal, in the next meeting, it shall be done, Shadow Minister. We will present that to you. But you must also understand that, I respected process because I was waiting for the department, the Minister of Finance to either look at the document and determine a way forward, because there's so many things that still need to go into that document that has come up in deliberations that we've had with the Treasury. So it will not be a final product in any case, but for the input and assistance of the committee, I shall gladly bring that document before your eyes. Thank you.
Thanks, Minister. Pumzile, what are you saying, Honorable Van Dam? Okay. I think the Minister responded, clarified some of the issues. Any other response that is outstanding from the questions posed? No outstanding, but there is a follow-up question from Honorable Van Dam.
Chair, I just have a question for the acting CEO. Sorry, I forgot to ask this one. What is the status of the merger of the Henley Studios and the News Resource? What's the status with that?
The COO is actually handling that project, so I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Honorable Van Dam. We have reversed that merger. We're in the process of aligning the systems because that's what we've done. Yeah, that's where we are.
Can you repeat it?
Okay. She asked about the status of the merger because there was a merger of two entities. One was technology and the other was the news department. There was then a complaint which was presented to us as a petition that from the affected colleagues, mostly who were in the news department. We then engaged the complaint to understand how they were affected, although the objective was a business objective to consolidate all our resources in areas where the utilization was not what it should be, and which also led to unnecessarily wastages in some of the areas. But we've met with the affected colleagues and we've agreed that we will undo the merger, which is what has happened. We're now in the process, because there were two divisions which were brought together. We're now in the process of aligning the systems. I hope that satisfied you.
Okay. You seem lost, Pumzile, on the response. I want us to finish that response before we go to the Minister.
How much money was lost from this merger, and has any of that money been recovered?
The merger itself, there was no money lost. Remember there were two divisions. There was the technology division as well as the news division. Some of the facilities were not properly utilized, so what we did was to consolidate. So there wasn't money. All we did was put together whatever cost which were incurred in the different areas. So there was no money that was lost in the process. But there is a complaint that the merger itself was as a result of some money lost, which is being investigated. But the process itself did not result in a loss of any kind.
So in other words, there is a measure.
There was a measure, which resulted in a complaint from some of our colleagues. We then undid or unbundled the measure, which is where we're at now.
Okay. Measure was undone.
Yes.
Acting CEO, before the Minister.
No, I just wanted to explain that these are two departments within the SABC where there are similar kind of work. So news department would have similar resources, technology would have similar resources. At a point, there was a recognition that if we pool the resources, it could result into cost savings. And that was the business objective that she makes reference to. Now, that the implementation or the rollout was probably not done in the best of manners in terms of change management and also taking people along is what resulted into the complaint. But certainly there was no monies that would have been moved from here to there. If anything, maybe it's a reallocation of the budgets, which is an internal process. There's no money.
I think it's clear. No, it's not different from what the acting COO was saying, but there was an addition that clarifies it. Minister?
Chairperson, on that question of the charter versus the MOI, the only MOI that is operational is the one signed off by Minister Karim. And the issue was the dispute with the interim board had nothing to do with the fact that they could have looked at the charter. The issue was about which MOI was operational. That was the issue. And the one signed by Minister Karim is not under dispute.
Clear? You remember from the ad hoc committee, this was one of the issues. And the clarity is that what is used and confirmed by, is it CPIC, is the 2014, is 2014 MOI. After that, there is no other MOI recognized. Are you fine?
But the point to be made, Chair, that in terms of the charter, the process they followed was not incorrect. That's the point I'm making, that the charter says that the board, what's the exact wording? The board interviews and then the minister approves. So in terms of that document, that process is not incorrect.
Can I give you a minister before, so that we can step off this matter, because we are going in circles on it. Honourable Minister.
But in terms of the MOI, which both parties were referring to, the board was incorrect.
Honourable Kongbela.
No, I propose that we close. If there was no MOI that the minister is referring to, I would understand. But if there's an MOI which she correctly quotes, I see no clash. I see no clash. For instance, if the SABC chart was against provision of the submission of a profile, I would understand, Honorable Fanda. But the charter simply focuses on what she says. But the MOI goes further and say, so I don't understand the clash. I propose we close the matter.
Let's proceed. I think it's clarified. Let's proceed. Let's proceed. Members, I think we're done with SABC if you are satisfied. But sizahlukana sinjalo ne-SABC. There are so many decisions that we have taken as the committee. And all those surely will have to be again packaged so that when you come back, when are they coming back? On the 26th of October. I think we must get to a situation where we say this is what we resolved as the committee for you to act. And say A, B, C, D, up to Z And when you come back, you say, this is how far we have gone. Because it talks to the plan that Honorable Kungbela was saying. I mean, if you just work and there is no plan to deal with what we... By the way, we don't request these things. We instruct you as the entity to do. And if they are not done, there is something that we must do about you as management of SABC. I was listening to another committee. I don't want to go to that extent. The practices of other countries, if you are not doing what you are supposed to do, as people who come to us, you are arrested. I don't want to go there because in other countries that's happening. So we'll have to do that again, just to give you the resolutions of the committee and remind you that because of this change of people in SABC, one day it was this one who was the CEO, today is this one acting and COO acting. Who's not acting, by the way? All of you acting. Honorable Kalago, this is another Hollywood minister. The sooner we do these appointments, the better. Maybe we must release SABC now, and it's 12:30. Surely we must extend our start of lunch from 1 to 1:30, so that we give MDDA an hour with us as a first bite, and then after that we go for lunch at 1:30. If you want to benefit from our lunch, SABC, you'll have to wait for 1:30. But if not, then you can leave. Or if you want to listen to MDDA, when we engage with MDDA, you may sit and wait for your flights here. It will benefit you, I assure you. Thank you very much, members. Let's call your team to join you, Minister.
All right, live there from Parliament, where the acting executives of the SABC are facing some tough questions in Parliament. We've been hearing specifically questions around the appointment of the new board, which is crucial, and speculation that there's been undue interference in the selection process of the board. And then as well, questions around the financial situation at the broadcaster. Okay, so we'll bring you more on that and what's come out of that parliamentary briefing coming up in our news at 1. For now, let's take a break. More coming up just after this.
much.
Good afternoon, Karim. Can we take positions again so that we proceed with the presentation of MDDA? But at the end of the meeting, we'll have to Emmanuel, no, Crispian, can you settle down? At the end of the meeting, so that there is no distortion of facts. Because this meeting is a continuous one. We'll then have to summarize the decisions of today. And then we issue a statement. Justice. It's just that the communications office, I don't know what's going on. Parliament communications. Is there Parliament communications here? Oh. And then we'll issue a statement on behalf of the committee. And then if you talk, you will talk on behalf of your party, not on behalf of the committee. Parties are free to talk, but not distort what we have decided upon here. Minister, over to you. MDDA presentation.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. On the MDDA, Out of the 61 targets, the 61 targets set, 42 were achieved and 19 were not achieved. We did not deal with partially achieved because...
Can someone close that door? Honorable Van Dam? Sorry, Minister. We are on MDDA. Eh?
Yes, Chair, I just want to get clarity on this, the CEO. Who's the acting CEO now who's going to be with Donald Lipoko sending it back to GCIS?
Who is presenting?
And who is going to present?
You know, when before joining Parliament, I went to a meeting of a sub-region of the ANC, somewhere in the Transkei. And when I was opening a meeting like this, somebody entered the room and raised the hand and asked a question before the meeting starts. And I'll advise that the minister is empowered to tell us as to what is happening. Because that question can wait, Honorable Van Dijk. So that if the issue of the CEO is not addressed, we then ask the question. There is a minister who is the political head. There is like any other entity, there is the chairperson of the board. And thereafter the, what is it? The sequence or the sequence flows to the CEO. But the reason why there is a chairperson of the board is the person who must deal with issues, and then the CEO deals with the detail of the thing. Maybe the minister will cover all those questions. Why don't we? Because it's going to be asked by you now, Honorable Van Dam. Are you okay now?
The reason we're asking, I think with the SABC, we wanted to know who is here, on what basis are they presenting. So I also wanted to know, in terms of the board, who all is here, and if there are apologies from certain board members, which board members are not here and why aren't they here. So I think that's the information that we were trying to request, so that we're clear about who is here and what they're presenting.
Honourable Minister, you are capable of dealing with those issues. Can you start the presentation, and surely those issues, as you have a mandate, you will deal with them.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. The acting CEO is Khululwa Seyisi, and he was unable to make it today because he had a sick child. We couldn't bring all members of the board with us because of cost-saving measures. So that was the reason why it is not everybody who is here. As I said earlier on, we had 61 targets set, 42 achieved, and none not achieved were 19. And as I had done last week and again with the SABC, I will give you the indicator and also reasons for failure and interventions to be employed to meet the target. The first one is percentage funded positions filled. And MDDA was supposed to have filled 90% of the approved positions. And a new organogram was approved in Q4 of the previous year, but recruitment in 2016-17 was initially focused on positions covered by funding that had been committed. And recruitment for some positions reporting to the CEO had also been put on hold to enable the permanent CEO to participate in the recruitment process. And with the commitment by two major funders later this year, the focus was intensified on recruiting for all positions in the organogram, Recruitment to fill outstanding positions continue to be focused in 2017-2018. And as I said, with some of the entities, they will fill in all of these positions by November, end of November, but others it will be end of January. Still on human resource management, the performance indicator is to review performance management system, and the target was 1. The position of HR was vacant, resulting in capacity constraints within the HR unit. And in 2016-2017, an HR plan was approved, which covers the review of the performance management system with the appointment of the HR manager in Q1 of the 2017-18 financial year. The review of performance management systems is being carried out in this financial year. On the next performance indicator, still on sub-program 1, which is human resources, the percentage of signed contracts, it was supposed the target was 100%. And the reason for failure is that 5 staff did not sign performance contracts for Q4, as they reported to the CEO and HR manager, which were both vacant or partially filled posts, which would mean it was acting people. All staff at the MDDA have signed performance contracts for 2016-2017. The next one is sub-program legal and regulatory affairs. And the indicator was turnaround lead time for contract vetting and approval was 8 weeks. And the vacancies in critical position placed capacity constraints on the unit. And the position of the legal and contracts officer is being filled in this financial year as part of the recruitment plan. The next indicator is percentage of litigation cases handled, and the target was 100%. And in 2016-17, there were 2 cases during that time, and efforts are being made to settle the cases out of court. On performance indicator, under the same sub-program, percentage of policy development and legislative review contributions, which was set at 100%. And while there was no call for policy development and legislative review contributions from the shareholder, the other legislation was reviewed, which may have impacted on community media. The position of legal and contracts officer is being filled, which will also take care of this indicator and ensure that it is fulfilled. On financial administration and auxiliary services, we have the number of incidents of irregular, unauthorized, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure, taking it down to 0 as being the target. And the main reason why we had not achieved this was the extension of contracts and vacancies at the agency and communication breakdown in the implementation of the CSD system. And there was no fruitless and wasteful expenditure. The filling of vacancies in 2017-18, as well as other interventions such as training and development, keeping abreast of National Treasury circulars will reduce these incidents. Under risk management and internal audit, the performance indicator was an updated and approved assurance plan. The target was 1, and there were vacancies in key critical positions. And the recruitment for positions was prioritized, with internal audit officer and risk management specialists joining the MDDA towards the end of Q4. On community broadcast sub-program, which is community broadcast media, the number of community television stations supported for strengthening was 4. There were limited applications from community radio stations. The MDDA has adopted a proactive approach to engage with these sectors to identify where support for community TV is required. And on community broadcast still, the other one is a percentage of community broadcast funds dispersed, and it is set at 80%. And the reason for the failure was that beneficiary projects and non-performance and late reporting has negatively impacted on the MDDA's ability to adequately disperse funds to these beneficiaries. The MDDA has carried out a root cause analysis into the reason why various projects defect and fail to report adequately and on time as required by the grant agreements. It is anticipated that with the increased training and increased monitoring of the projects, this will improve compliance. On digital media, the performance indicator is that 70% of disbursement of funds must be approved, and the beneficiary projects and the MDDA has carried out a root cause analysis as well. It is the same as above. The concept document on the review of the MDDA Act to be submitted. A concept document has been developed, but waiting for the MDDA impact study and the Department of Communications Print Media Transformation Study for greater in-depth analysis. But both studies will be available in 2017-18, and the outcomes will be used to finalize the concept document. On MDDA digital migration strategy approved, which was one. Both studies will be available in 2017-18, and the outcomes will be used to finalize the concept document along with the input from the MDDA-supported online projects. On the number of media awards held, it was 1. The media awards were delayed as a result of outcomes of the study on awards for community-based media, which was completed in Q4. A revamped approach to media awards, taking into consideration the study findings, will be launched. And on capacity building, number of partnership agreements with credited learning institutions and training institutions per province, which was set at 4. The capacity building projects were deferred to end of Q3 until the outcome of the MDDA impact study. The impact study will be finalized at the end of October 2017, and the results will be used to establish appropriate training partnerships for 2017-2018. Again, on building capacity, the number of MOUs signed with partners that enhance our project's environment, the number was set at 4. The capacity building projects were deferred to end of Q3 until the outcome of the impact study. So all of this really is dependent on the finalization of the impact study and its implementation. It would be the same as well with the number of training interventions on finance, marketing, reporting, governance, learning forum, and grant orientation workshops. The number of media literacy workshops conducted, it was supposed to be 1, and lack of capacity in the unit due to the vacancies. And then on number of media exchange programs conducted, 1, and the lack is due to capacity in the unit as well. And the filling of the vacant post in the research and capacity building unit was prioritized with an additional officer recruited in Q4, and also was the case with the director as well for capacity building, which was also finalized in Q4. That will be all, Chairperson.
Okay. Okay, Minister, you can now do the right thing. Delegate.
Yes, it will be the Chairperson that will be giving the presentation.
Thank you, Minister. I think the presentation by the Minister...
Chairperson.
Yes, Chair.
Kaloku kanenzela request you banning all those things.
Yes, all right. Sorry. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair. With me, I'm the chair of the board, MDDA, and I have 4 colleagues with me. Musa Sishang is also another board member. Cheryl is the head of communication. Trevor is the acting CFO, and Sibongile is the head of HR. As we indicated, there's an apology from the acting CEO. Chair,
there are 2 board members appointed by the president.
Yes, in fact, that's my first line, that we're coming to present to you now with a correcting board from slide 7. So we have a fully correcting board, which has always been the issue. So in essence, when the correcting board actually met, we urgently, a week later, we met as the board to address the issues of backlog, which are related with our projects. And in essence now, part of that meeting was also discussing what are the things that we need to do to ensure that we build the stability of the organization. And that takes me into slide 12. because amongst the key things that we have lost some time in relation to what are the things that we need to do in relation to stabilization. I think the first issue there is that the board had took a decision that we need to stabilize the organization. One of the things we need to do is to complete the recruitment process, which is actually completed from our side, and as per MOI or shareholder agreement compact with the minister, we've already submitted the recommended candidate, and she's considering that, and we're hoping in 2 months' time we should have a CEO, which we believe is a critical position for us to be able to build a stable organization. I think the second issue there we're raising is that we actually need to be able to, part of rebuilding the organization is to get an external facilitated process between the board and staff and begin to look at some of the issues that the staff seem to be concerned about, and look a better way of resolving them. Then the other issue is the stakeholder engagement. We are of the view that part of stabilizing the organization and rebuilding its reputation and public trust is that we must interact with our stakeholders so that we clarify to them where the organization is and what are the key things that we need to do. We're going to be setting up an inter-steering committee between ICASA and Centec and ourselves and DOC to address the issues that are specifically affecting the broadcasting sector. We are also planning within this current financial year a community media indaba to address sustainability issues that are related with the sector. And then the other issue is really media engagement to ensure that there's more media, that we actually provide leadership. I think when we appeared before the portfolio committee before, we actually spoke about the 5-year plan, and amongst the key things is to position MDDA as a thought leadership on issues of media development and diversity, but as well as transformation. We will pursue the partnership with Maxita to actually fund, support the training and development and skills development of the sector. The second one is that we're in a process of concluding the MOU with the Competition Commission on the establishment of the Economic Development Fund to ensure that we support the transformation of the sector, and as well as ensure that we properly support the broadcasting sector. I think the issue that comes out very clearly on the report that the minister had just presented, it's the role of the social impact study, because we believe that it's one evidence-based and scientific document that will help us to begin to refine and reposition the organization, both in terms of our own interventions, but as well as in terms of our responsiveness, and how do we craft a responsive training program. And hence, because amongst the feedback we'd received in one of our research program was that our capacity development program is not responsive sufficiently, and in essence we thought that we needed to do something that is evidence-based. There are 2 slides, members, which is I'm taking back and forth, which is on the slide 8, 9 and 10, which looks at specific AGs specific AG report in terms of what are the things that we want to do there. And I think we will include, because it also includes part of our corrective measures in relation to the fundings of the AG. We will deal with them when we talk about the financing, when our acting CFO is dealing with the financing. I'm now going to hand over to Ms. Cheryl, who will then just highlight the performance areas, in addition to what the minister presented, and she will start from slide 14.
Good morning. Thank you very much. On slide 14, we just give a breakdown of the achievement and non-achievement of targets per program, and what I'd like to point out is that our core program of grant and seed funding, we achieved 10 out of 13 of the indicators, which we feel is important that we pursue achievement in that area. The other area is capacity building, which the Minister already mentioned. We had put projects on hold at the end of December, awaiting the results of the impact study, but we did actually, in the first 3 quarters, obviously did run capacity building interventions. If the next slide just gives an overall audit outcome, and the AG audited 2 programs for performance information, and Program 2, which is grants and seed funding, was qualified, which was a change status. It was qualified due to a finding on one of the 13 key performance indicators, which was a number of indirect jobs. This was due to the AG feeling that we didn't show sufficient evidence for our achievement. In the next few slides, I'm going to go through very briefly. They're just key achievements. The first one is we've approved more community media projects in the last year than we did in any previous year since it awarded its first project in 2004. And in line with the mandate, these projects were very much weighted towards rural areas where the majority of historically disadvantaged communities are. In terms of funding, once again, we raised more money in the 1 year than we have in a single year since the establishment of the MDDA. The 3 major funders were Multi-Choice, SABC, and the DOC. Multi-Choice gave us an additional discretionary amount in about September last year, in addition to renewing the funding contract. Another achievement was our social integration. This started off with the presidential project between Mamelodi and Esteris based on PERT FM, and we have since expanded this initiative to the Western Cape with a proposed social integration project between Khayelitsha and Gugulethu based on Radio Zibanela. In terms of capacity building, we've just listed some of the projects that we did, and these range from science reporting through to gender-based violence awareness reporting through to the press code e-learning. Stakeholder achievement, we have started a pilot outreach to raise awareness of the MDDA and community media, and we're also engaging with key stakeholders just to mobilize support for the community media amongst our stakeholders, such as we started engaging with SALGA to identify a way forward to how they can assist community media, not only with advertising support, but with other assistance, such as use of premises. In terms of research, we concluded 3 important studies. One was, we commissioned the impact study, which is due this month. We concluded a study on community media awards, and we also did a study on best practice towards supporting social integration, and this was around the social integration project in Khayelitsha and Gugulethu. If we go to the detailed program performance, slide 23 just gives you a breakdown of the amount approved for the current year in the core projects of grant and seed funding and research, training and capacity building. You can see the majority of MDDA funds, the vast majority goes to these projects. And we just show out the amount paid for the current year. Just note that this is the first tranche that we pay on projects approved during that year. We obviously paid out additional funds as continuing tranches for projects approved previously. The reasons for non-achievement falls into 3 major area of targets. It's basically the projects are beneficiaries non-performance or late reporting, and that affected our disbursement of funds, as the Minister already mentioned. The second one is the finalization of the MDDA impact study. We believe it will have a number of findings that will assist us in our initiatives going forward. And the third one is a lack of capacity, which did hinder a lot of our targets in various of our programs. This slide just shows slide 25 just shows a geographic spread of projects to show that we do try to cover all 9 provinces. Obviously, there are some provinces we still need to give greater attention to. Slide 26 just gives you an example of a broadcast project we supported last year. It's MASH FM, and we just wanted to indicate how we are trying to deliver on our mandate and the type of projects we select in terms of language diversity, in terms of historically disadvantaged, in terms of supporting youth. This list, as I said, we focused on our core projects in this presentation. The Minister's already gone through the reasons for non-achievement. There were only 2 of the targets here that weren't achieved. You'll see the first 2 targets. First, we overachieved, we exceeded, and that was due to the funding that we received from the MOU we entered into with the DOC to manage projects that had applied directly to the DOC for upgrading studio equipment to digital equipment. So that was something we entered into last year and we hadn't planned for the year before. In terms of turning now to print and digital media, once again, this is an example of a newspaper that we have supported and how it meets our mandate. So it's owned by a publisher from a historically disadvantaged background, circulated in the rural areas, and it has provided jobs for 4 young aspiring journalists, and also provides training opportunities for the youth. Similarly, in print and digital media, we only one target we didn't meet, and the reason for that has already been outlined. It's a disbursement of funds. And our capacity building performance, we didn't achieve any of our targets due to the decision towards the end of Q3. But as I mentioned before, we had done a considerable amount of training and interventions in the first 3 quarters. So even though we haven't achieved, we do reflect that there are training interventions that we carried out. So in the next slide, it just gives you the training and the research projects we supported, the dates, and obviously the amount funded. Shows you also, the wide, the diversity and the type of training we do provide, from governance through to topics such as gender-based violence. I won't go through these slides because these are the targets not achieved, so I'll just leave those out. And we now turn to human resources, and my colleague, the Human Resources and Corporate Affairs Manager, will speak on that.
Just before the Human Resources, what?
And Corporate Affairs.
And Corporate Affairs. You didn't respond to, Board Chair, you didn't respond to the question. Where are the new board members who are recently appointed by the President? When I was trying to respond to some of the questions, I said those will be attended to. But I'm now happy that at least you part of the presentation will be done by the human resource person, the employee of MDDA. Because I think we really need to balance that, so that it's just that I don't know who's there in terms of management or in terms of the hierarchy. This is what I wanted. In terms of the hierarchy, after the chair of the board and members of the board, there is CEO, and then below CEO, there is a whole range of other people who are employed by MDDA. And the expectation is that those people take part in presenting to the committee. I'm not sure if members are listening to my issues, because it's exactly what, that was the line of questions from Honorable Van Dam and Honorable Van Dijk. I know those 2 members are newly appointed, and I thought members of the board as a collective will say board members so and so, particularly the new ones who were just appointed, in terms of apologies. Can you go ahead, Chair of the Board, on that, unless there is somebody else who's going to do that?
Chair, let me just say the Minister had responded on the absence, yes, of the...
I could call.
Yes.
I'm very sorry. It looks like even other members didn't get that.
Yes.
What was the minister saying?
Yes, no, the minister was saying due to cost, because remember the last time the committee had asked us that we must not bring a big delegation. That's one. I think the other thing is that when one of the members of the board who works for GCIS was here presenting, the committee congratulated that member, which is Ms. Tasnim Karim. Yes. And then the second issue, Chair, just to say, Cheryl is the head of communication. So she's an employee. She's not a board member. Yes. Hence, she was presenting on the substance. Yes, Minister.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good afternoon, honorable members. I will be giving a summary of the personnel information for 2016-17. In our slides, we start with the team that met the committee sometime in March. Thank you for the visit, committee members. In 2016-17, the MDDA had 39 funded posts. Of those funded posts, 25 were filled, and one was filled, 25 were filled, and one was filled in a fixed-term contract. 14 posts remained vacant in 2016-17. We had one acting position, being the acting CFO. Of the vacant posts, we now know to date that recruitment processes have been finalized for the CEO. We are moving with speed to focus on filling the post of the Chief Financial Officer, notwithstanding the fact that we are also paying attention to filling other posts in other sub-programs, and there is progress in our detailed recruitment plan. Under recruitment and terminations, in the year under review, we had 9 appointments which were done in 16-17, and this is a huge improvement if you compare with the year 15-16, where there were only 5 appointments in the year. In the same year, we had 2 terminations, one being a resignation and the one being a contract termination. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Go ahead, Puti.
Good afternoon, Chair and honorable members. I would now take you through the audit outcome and the financial report for the MDDA. For the 2016-17 year, MDDA achieved an unqualified audit opinion, and this was the same as the report which was received in the previous year, 2015-16. So a lot of work was done to maintain the outcome, but then ideally we are aiming to achieve a clean audit status in the years that are coming. Now focusing on the 3 areas that the AGSA were looking at, in terms of the financial statements, the feedback that we received was that the overall quality of the financial statements has improved, and there were minor amendments that were made to the financial report, and these are covering intangibles and trade payables. But this resulted in a paragraph being taken out of the audit report, which is an accomplishment from the previous year. But where we fell short was in 2 areas, and this was mainly around the compliance with laws and regulations. Our controlled environment was really tested in the last financial year, and the feedback that we received was that we still need to improve on compliance with laws and regulations, and specific focus being on supply chain management. I'll talk to the interventions that we have currently put in place around supply chain management. But we have drawn up an action plan and delegated to all managers the key areas of focus that will seek to improve the audit opinion for the 2017-18 financial year. On performance information, as alluded to by Cheryl, it was one of the key performance targets in the core programs that the information that we supplied, AG did not have the comfort that the measurement basis was reliable. Moving on to slide 40, we have prepared for the committee an analysis of the areas that the AG raised findings that were contained in our management report. So this is an internal management report which was highlighting the areas of focus for the agency. You'll see there that in total it's 30 findings. This was a slight improvement from the previous year because we had 36 findings in 2015-16 that made their way to the management report. But what I would like to say is, of the 30 findings, 3 findings affected the final audit report, and this is around supply chain and the indirect jobs one, as previously alluded. But most of the issues that have been raised are around the human resources, performance information, and financial management, but on an administrative level as then internal control deficiencies. So there is work being put in place to turn around the agency to improve this. And then on slide 41, what we have done in the interim is to assign key areas of focus to the respective offices to make sure that there's a focus in improving the areas that the Auditor General has identified. One of the areas that we are putting a lot of effort in is improving record management system. The turnaround time in document submission was a bit of a challenge during this audit, but we are trying to improve our processes internally to have electronic and hard copy backup information so that upon request, within a year or 2 years down the line, we are able to provide this information in good time. In terms of the Office of the Chief Financial Officer, the main focus that has been given to me is on ensuring compliance with supply chain regulations and making sure that we stay abreast with the circulars that National Treasury issues and the impact thereof on the business. In terms of contract management, this is also one of the areas that we're trying to focus on to make sure that we clean up our contract register. Most of the findings that find their way to as irregular are based on contract management. So we were trying to make sure that a whole system approach is taken to make sure that it's an integrated system that covers all the areas that affect the business as a whole. And then in terms of HR, I think my colleague has mentioned that we are making a lot of there's a lot of work in progress to fill in the vacant positions. I think a total of 9 positions were filled in the last year, but there are still some vacancies, and they're at critical levels. So these are in the process of being filled. And then on performance information, it's mainly ensuring that we improve how we set our targets and making sure that before the annual performance plans are actually approved by Parliament, one of the steps that we've taken now is to make sure that there's engagement with the Auditor General, so that they look at our APP to make sure that the issue of definitions of targets and compliance in terms of SMART is met at an approval stage. And then if we go on to our next slide, this is now looking at the financial report. And one of the areas, as I've previously highlighted, that MDDA fell short of was the issue of irregular expenditure. Now, a lot of work was done in terms of capacitating the supply chain unit. But we were unfortunate in the 2016-17 year because there were a number of significant changes on a national scale that affected our internal processes. So one of those was in the beginning of the 2016-17 financial year, National Treasury actually implemented a central supplier database. So the spirit of the CSD essentially is to standardize the procurement process across all organs of state, and we gladly adhered to this. But from the audit by the Auditor General of National Treasury and the CSD in specific, it was highlighted that some of the checks that CSD was actually intended to do, such as your BEE verification and your service and state status of bidders, the system is not yet at that level, and therefore a manual system was required to be done by entities. So at the time of awarding quotations, even if you get the 3 codes from the CSD, there's an additional requirement that an entity was supposed to get certified copies of BE certificates from the bidders. So that is one aspect that we fell short of because we had the CSD reports that indicated BE status and what we used to evaluate. So the learning from here was that, and what we've implemented is to make sure that there's a parallel process of supplier verification to strengthen our internal compliance around procurement and expenditure management, and also making sure that the 2 supply chain officers attend regular trainings with National Treasury. In the 2016-17 financial year, we're happy to report that there was no fruitless and wasteful expenditure. This was an improvement from the previous financial year where we had 1 million fruitless and wasteful expenditure. Sorry. At the end of the 2016-17 year, in terms of contingent liabilities and litigations, there were 2 cases that the legal unit was working on, and one is a labor court dispute with the former employee, and then the other was a contractual dispute with the supplier for broadcast equipment. The next slide really focuses on what we are trying to do to improve the area where we fell short in terms of procurement management. And as a first step, because the audit was completed in July 2017, and the recommendation was that we need to look at our contract register. The contracts that have been deemed as irregular, we needed to take steps to terminate those and start a new process of request for quotations and advertise for tenders if there's a contract that is above 500,000. So what we have done to date, honorable members, is for one of the contracts that was identified for courier services, we've actually written to National Treasury and we have been given permission to participate in the transversal contract for courier services, and we're using that contract that National Treasury has approved. And then in terms of the broadcast equipment and the printing of leases, we've advertised in the Government Gazette last week for those tenders to be participated in by bidders, and we hope that this will improve in terms of that aspect. There's still a lot of work that we're doing now in the background to discuss with other suppliers that are also on the register and inform them of the process that we're taking forward to improve. But we've also started the manual verification of supplier BE points by requesting that suppliers submit their certified copies of the BE certificates and SBD forms at the time of bidding for work at the MDDA. And as I've alluded to earlier, it's mainly around educating the staff within the unit and keeping abreast of the SCM regulations. So we're in constant communication with the team from Treasury just to make sure that we are available and there's someone who is representing the agency in the trainings that National Treasury is engaging with. And then from an operational perspective, we have been, we will also be looking at the review of our delegations to make sure that this is aligned to operational requirements and to improve on compliance with those delegations. And then our next report is focusing on the use of consultants in the 2016-17 financial year. And I'd like to just inform the committee that the main reason for the use of consultants in the agency was attributed to the 36% vacancy rate at the end of the year. But the plan is to make sure that all the work that is done by the agency is done in-house. In the internal audit unit, for the greater part of the year, except until February 2017, there were no staff in the internal audit unit. We were using the services of a co-source firm, but we managed to appoint an internal audit officer and a risk management specialist in February. So that is only towards the end of the year. But this is a positive step in capacitating the unit. And then in terms of human resources, as the colleagues have alluded to, there's a new permanent human resources and corporate affairs manager, as well as a human resources officer that have been placed in those positions in the unit. And then in terms of the finance, it was also a similar situation. There was only one internal staff member was on a permanent basis, but then now currently there are 3 of us, and the process of recruiting a CFO is in place. And then the last one where we use the services of consultants was on the annual report design. So this will take quite some time because it includes printing and design of the actual annual reports. So we are trying to get to a phase where we do most of the work internally to reduce the cost, but the printing facility will need to still have that done externally. And then our last slide.
No, that's fine. We said 1:30.
Okay.
You'll have to conclude when we come back from lunch.
Thank you.
Otherwise, they should have been done long time ago. Members will break for lunch until 2:15. Okay. So we'll have to be here at 2:15, and then you continue where you have left. Mtlakas. Thank you. We just break for lunch and then come back at 2:15. Thank you.
Honorable members, the lunch will be served at Old Assembly Restaurant, and the guests will be served here.